The American Revolutionary era lasted from 1775 to 1789. The origins of the Revolution came from increased taxes, which Britain needed to pay off the debt from the 7 Years' War. They predicted they would need even more money to defend new territory in North America, so they taxed the colonies directly. One of these taxes, known as the Stamp Act, was a tax on commercial and legal documents, diplomas, pamphlets, newspapers, almanacs, dice, and playing cards. A stamp on a given tax indicated that it had been paid, but the feeling of anger was widespread. What really separated the United States and Great Britain was the water mass in between them, which led to a feeling of separation. Great Britain then cut America out of the tea business from China. Independent merchants in the United States were angered by this, so the Boston Tea Party occurred. In response to this, Britain put in place the Coercive Acts, which curtailed local elections and town meetings and expanded the royal governor's power. In September 1774, the First Continental Congress met in Philadelphia, but no compromise was found, and thus fighting began in April 1775. The feelings of American revolutionaries can be summed up in a quote from Common Sense, where Thomas Paine says, quote, "A small island should not rule a great continent," unquote. This caused colonists to further separate themselves and see themselves as morally superior. Meanwhile, the Second Continental Congress met on July 4, 1776, and made the Declaration of Independence. In this document, they listed the tyrannical acts of George III, the King of Britain, and declared themselves an independent nation. Families were divided, either between patriots or loyalists. Great Britain faced many difficulties because of the enemies they had made in expansion. In particular, France signed an alliance with the United States because they wanted revenge on Britain for the 7 Years' War. The Spanish and the Dutch went to war on Britain in 1779. Russia created the League of Armed Neutrality. Britain signs the Treaty of Paris in 1783, which grants the U.S. independence and territory between the Allegheny Mountains and the Mississippi River. However, the U.S. deserts France in the treaty. The liberal program that was the American Revolution was consolidated by a federal constitution known as the Bill of Rights and the creation of a national republic. The delegates of the Constitutional Assembly met in Philadelphia in the summer of 1787. The central government operated in Montesquieu's checks and balances system, where the executive, legislative, and judicial branches all balanced one another. The Revolution's impact on Europe was ginormous. Hundreds of books and pamphlets were written about this particular revolution. The European people noted the long-term implications for international politics. The Americans had begun with a revolutionary defense against tyrannical oppressors, and they were victorious. This made one Enlightenment idea clearer: a better world was possible.
The French Revolution.
The French Revolution, from 1789 to 1791. The French Revolution was largely impacted by the American Revolution, because officers from the American Revolution, like Marquis de Lafayette, came back to France with the love of liberty. Let's talk about why the French Revolution started. So, like the American Revolution, the roots for the French Revolution were financial difficulties. Louis XV tried to raise taxes, but they were rejected, so the country's debt just kept going up and up and up. They almost got to bankruptcy, but because the monarchy was so weak, that couldn't happen, and they couldn't print money, and they couldn't get themselves out. What also played a major role in the causes of the French Revolution was the social structure. So basically, there were three estates, the first being the clergy, the second being the nobility, and the third being everyone else. The first estate, the clergy, numbered 100,000, and they had special privileges. The nobility as well was lightly taxed, had special privileges, walked around with swords, and dressed in weird fancy clothing. The third estate was the peasants.
The French Revolution began with the bankruptcy and Louis XVI attempting to raise taxes. Now, Louis XVI was particularly hated, along with his wife Marie Antoinette, because of how frivolous they were and how the common people despised seeing that when they had such heavy taxes on them. The final straw was when they tried to impose a tax and the people completely rejected it and demanded that the Estates General meet. The Estates General were the three estates that Caroline had mentioned earlier. Now, when the three estates met, the First Estate and the Second Estate each got 1 vote. This is an example of the Estates General. The First Estate and the Second Estate each got 1 vote, and the Third Estate got 1 vote as well. Except the nobility and the clergy always banded together to vote against the Third Estate, which made things difficult for the voice of the people to be heard. So, the Third Estate demanded that they have a new sort of system, and when they made this demand, they came back the next day and found that their meeting place had been completely closed down under construction. Now, they went to their local tennis court in order to meet together and try and make a plan of action, and what they made was the Tennis Court Oath, which was where they promised to not disband until they had made a constitution. Now, this Tennis Court Oath of 1789 was the beginning of the French Revolution.
Following the formation of the National Assembly, Louis XVI felt the need to reassert his royal authority, so he ordered an army to march towards Paris and Versailles. In Paris, there were already angry peasants protesting the soaring prices of bread, and as tensions rose, a mob stormed the Bastille, which was a royal fortress and prison. What they wanted was the weapons and supplies they could get to make a peasant revolt. On August 27, 1789, the National Assembly issued the Declaration of the Rights of Man. The Declaration proclaimed that all men were born and remained free and equal in rights. These natural rights included the rights to liberty, property, security, and resistance to oppression. Over the course of the Revolution, the rights of women improved. Women gained increased rights to inherit property and to divorce. On March 5, 1789, in what was called the Women's March to Versailles, thousands of women marched to Versailles demanding cheap. In regards to the Church, in August 1790, the National Assembly passed an act called the Civil Constitution of the Clergy. Overall, the French Revolution made a major impact on France, and not to mention the world, as it laid the foundations for a modern state governed by the people.